everybody, welcome back to my channel. I actually decided to record multiple videos in a day because I'm trying to plan ahead for when I won't be able to record at all, either because I am hospitalized having the baby or because I am too busy with a newborn. So I'm trying to still maintain the schedule that I've had so far when it comes to my video uploading and whatnot. So hopefully you guys don't mind that I'm wearing the same thing and pre-recording this video. Today's video is going to be my wrap-up for the month of January. I am so happy with how that month went. I think it was a fantastic way to start the year. I feel so accomplished and so pleased with what I managed to read. I ended up reading 12 reads throughout the month, and it was very well mixed. Without any further ado, let me go ahead and give you the breakdown of what I read during January. I read 3 novels, 3 comic book volumes, 2 short story collections, 2 children picture books, 1 middle grade modern classic, and 1 poetry anthology. Out of those books, I gave 2 stars to 2 of them, 4 stars to 4 of them, and 5 stars to 6 of them. As usual, let's go ahead and get started with the 2-star reads, which were my least favorites of the month. First, the one that I'll probably talk about the most, and that's actually the picture book. This is called The Digingest Dog, and this is by Al Perkins and illustrated by Eric Gurney. This is part of the beginner books, and I really liked the art style of the book. I mean, it's really cute and cartoony and kind of vintage, so it's really nice. However, I had some issues with the messages and the teachings of this particular book. I'll tell you what the story is about. The story is about a dog who is in a pet shop. He grew up in that pet shop. He's chained all the time and he is in this little cell. He's very unhappy until one day a boy comes into the shop, purchases the dog, takes him to his farm where he has all this space to run and to play, and he has his own dog house right outside the boy's window, and they are happy, they're playing, they're having a great time together. Until one day the boy introduces this dog to a group of other dogs because he believes that he needs to have more friends. And at first they all get along, everything's perfect. Then all the other dogs start to dig holes, and our main dog here, of course, does not know how to dig a hole because he's never digged a hole before. He's grown up his whole life in a concrete little cell, chained to the wall, so he has never known what it's like to be outside or do any of those things. So at first, of course, the dog doesn't know how to do it, and the dog is scared he'll disappoint his owner because he loves his boy and he doesn't want to disappoint him. But when he tries and attempts to dig, he trips over himself, he makes a hot mess. He just pretty much doesn't know how to dig. At this point, the other dogs do something that I find not nice. So here's when the other dogs start to dig. He is obviously very concerned because he knows he doesn't know how to do that. He's never done it before. Here's when he attempts to start digging and trips all over himself, and you can see the shock on all the other dogs' faces as well as the boy. And then pretty much the dogs decide to lift up their heads in the air, walk away from our main dog, upset because he doesn't know how to dig. And the other dogs said, Duke, which is the name that the kid gave to the dog, Duke may be big, but he's no good. He cannot dig. They stuck their noses in the air, they walked away, they left me there. So pretty much they're saying you're not good enough to be with us, you don't know how to dig. And I didn't agree with that message being introduced to kids. Then the little boy is trying to help the dog and teach him how to dig. After a few attempts, however, the dog can't get it. You can see the boy is very disappointed in the dog. which I think he should be a little bit more supportive. And then that night, the dog keeps on trying and trying until eventually he learns how to dig. And he is so happy when he shows the boy what he knows how to do. The boy gets super excited and he's like, oh, great, I'm so happy for you. You know how to dig now. I knew you could do it, even though he was very disappointed in him the previous night. However, the dog is so excited for the boy's encouragement and for the fact that he learned how to do what his boy wanted him to learn how to do, that he starts digging up the entire town. So he digs up all over the place until he gets confronted by the boy as well as the other dogs. And this is another section that really bothered me when it comes to the message that is portraying. You have the boy extremely upset, all the other dogs extremely upset. They're pretty much harassing our dog because he did something that the boy wanted him to do. He obviously doesn't know what he did was wrong. He's never even been told that what he did was wrong. The boy straight up starts saying, I'm going to shame you again and I'm going to return you to that store because you're no good. You were a bad dog and I don't want you anymore. So as he's about to shame him and the other dogs are about to attack him, he freaks out and decides to dig straight down. So he digs down so deep that he ends up falling into a well and he is drowning. And one of the dogs actually makes the comment that says, he wrecked our town, this serves him right, just let him drown. And I don't understand how you could think that's a good message to give to a kid. You know, pretty much, oh, somebody made a mistake, not knowing they were making a mistake. Well, they deserve the worst of the worst. I thought that was horrible. In the end, they end up reluctantly saving our main dog. And he ends up realizing, you know, that what he did by digging everything up was wrong, which again had not been told to him. So he didn't even know what he did was wrong. And he goes back and starts fixing everything up. The story has a happy ending. But the messages are all wrong. I think maybe if the boy had just pretty much teach the dog once he made the mistakes that he made, you know, train the dog, teach your dog, take responsibility because he is your dog, and train him on what he did wrong and teach him how not to do it again. But the fact that first the dogs walk away on him and mistreat him because he doesn't know how to do something that they do, that's just encouraging peer pressure and bullying, and I just didn't agree with that at all. Then the boy threatening to just return him, to rechain him, is cruel and is irresponsible as well. So it's teaching kids that if things get difficult, that's not a problem. You can just pretty much walk away, get rid of the thing that made it difficult, and don't take responsibility. So wasn't a fan of this at all. I only gave it 2 stars because I did like the artwork and I did like the beginning of the story. But another one that was disappointing was Code Red. This is obviously a comic book volume, and this is by Pat Chand, Vincenzo Riccardi, and Joel Ojeda, and is published by Cenescope. This is a fairy tale retelling, so obviously this is a retelling of the Red Riding Hood, and she goes by the name of Agent Red, and the entire storyline is pretty much through her perspective. So she is talking to herself in her mind, and that's how you're following the story. Of course, there are certain interactions with other people and whatnot. She has some inner difficulties because she is a werewolf a female werewolf. So she is her human part, but when she gets upset or whenever she feels like it really, but mainly when she has some kind of strong emotion such as fear, anger, whatnot, she transforms into a werewolf. And she considers that werewolf to be a monster. She wants to control it, and she doesn't necessarily like to become that werewolf. Excuse me. I get such bad heartburn. But it was okay. It was okay. It wasn't absolutely horrible. I liked the I liked the struggles, the internal struggles that the character had, but other than that, the rest of the plot, it was just not that interesting to me. The artwork was very standard for superhero comic artwork, and I wasn't completely sold on the story, which is why I gave it 2 stars. Like I said, like the main character and her train of thoughts was kind of interesting, but that was it. It wasn't as good as I thought it would be, so it was disappointing to me. I only gave it 2 stars. Now moving on to the 4 stars, because I didn't have any 3-star reads for the month. The first one I'll share with you is this adorable children's picture book. I really loved it, especially for a day at the beach with the kids. I think it would be adorable to take along and just teach your kids a lot about the kind of things that they'll find at the seashore while on your little trip. So pretty much this is an adorable kids picture book that tells you of different animals and different things that you might find on the seashore. And it's got this really cool illustrations. It also has these cool pages that are clear with part of the illustration, so if you flip it, you'll have like the inside or the other side of what it is that they're talking about. And I overall thought this was very interesting, very clever, very cute, and educating for kids to bring along. This is part of the Scholastic and is part of a first discovery book. The first book that I actually picked up in January is The Changeling by Victor Labelle. I've been mispronouncing this author's last name in every video that I've made about this book. I'm very sorry about that. I just recently learned how it's supposed to be pronouncing. I believe is Lavelle, unless I'm mispronouncing it yet again. Nonetheless, the story itself was very interesting, very weird, very thought-provoking, and it left you with a lot of questions. I have a book review for this, which I'll link somewhere above here, so I won't go into too many details about this book. But pretty much it follows a young couple and their child. The wife commits this horrible action towards the child as well as her husband and disappears. And the husband leaves in the search for his wife and to find out what truly happened to his child. There is a division in this book, so the book is sort of divided into 2 sections. You have the first section of the book, which is much more of a contemporary kind of story where you're introduced to the characters and you get the characters' background and their relationships and that sort of thing. And then you have the second half where is very much fairy tale and folklore inspired, as well as filled with magical realism, and it's just more crazy and it doesn't necessarily make sense, which is where all the questions come into play. However, I think that because of how the book is inspired by fairy tales and folklore, it doesn't necessarily have to make sense. Also because of all the magical realism. So I didn't necessarily mind that. I did wish it had more answers. I kind of wish the book was a little bit bigger and it had more information. And I kind of wish that division between the first half, which was my favorite out of the 2, and the second half wasn't so sharp and so intense. I wish he had like a little bit more of a flow, but nonetheless, I thought the writing was really good. I thought the story was really good. And like I said, if you want to hear more of my thoughts, I did a book review, so you're welcome to check that out. One of the comic books that I picked up during this month is called Ordinary by Rob Williams and Dee Israeli, and this is published by Titan Comics. This was very interesting. It was different, and that's, I think, why I enjoyed it so much, maybe. The art style is perfect for the kind of story that it, tells. It's a little quirky and just a little bit weird, but I really enjoyed it. It's very colorful, and I like the artwork quite a lot. The storyline pretty much follows a man who, he is a plumber, he lives by himself, he really doesn't take care of himself, and he is pretty much very disappointed in who he is and how he is. He had a wife and a child at one point, made many mistakes, and due to those mistakes that he made, he ended up by himself. And he hasn't, probably because he's ashamed of himself, he hasn't pursued a relationship with his son or anything of the sort. So he's very secluded from what was his family. One day, however, there is a virus, an airborne virus, that somehow it gets spread. It's never explained as to how or what happened, but somehow there's this airborne virus that ends up turning everybody into some kind of superhero. I wouldn't call all the changes that happen to some people as superhero-ish, but pretty much people start to change as if they have been just bathed in radioactivity. So they all start to change, with the exception of this one man. He's quite ordinary, yet he is extraordinary because he's the only person who is not affected. And there is this scientist who is in search of someone just like him, or hoping that there's at least one person that wasn't affected, in order to be able to study him and come up with a cure for what is happening, because obviously, as we humans tend to be so intelligent, we cannot have a lot of power because we don't know what to do with power. We get sick with power, and we self-destruct and destruct everything around us. So of course there's this series of horrible things happening throughout the entire world, as people just don't know how to deal with such power and, you know, such strength and whatnot. So there's a lot of chaos going on, and it is up to him to save the day. Also in the plot, there is the fact that he doesn't know if his song is okay. At first, he's not very interested in, you know, going to find him or whatnot, again, because he has a lot of self, you know, like insecurities and whatnot. However, his best friend, who by the way ends up turning into a bear, which was pretty cool, he gives him a pep talk, and he pretty much tells him, no, he's your son, you have to get over yourself and go find him, make sure he's safe, make sure he's okay. So he's also going on that journey to find his son and make sure he's all right, and hopefully recreate a relationship with him. I honestly really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the whole plot. I enjoyed the artwork. I thought it was really cool and really interesting and kind of different. And the last comic that I read this month is called Put the Book Back on the Shelf, and this is a Belle and Sebastian anthology. I didn't know who Belle and Sebastian was, so I had to Google them up, and they are actually a band. So I think they're Irish. I believe they're an Irish band of music. Obviously, I've never heard their music. I don't know what kind of music they play. I just briefly Googled them so I could know what exactly it was about. But this was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. And I think, have I heard them before, or like, had I heard of this band before, listened to their music before and whatnot, I would have probably ended up giving this 5 out of 5 stars because I really did enjoy it. But some things I didn't quite get. However, being an anthology, this has stories by multiple cartoonists and comic book artists. So it's got a series of different art styles, which in my opinion was the best part. I absolutely adored the art throughout. Some more than others, but it's got some really interesting art styles. It's got short stories that don't necessarily have any words. It has short stories that have a deeper plot and whatnot. And all of the stories were inspired by the music of this band. So I thought it was very, very interesting. If some of the stories really reflect what the lyric of this band's music must be like, then I am quite curious to listen to some of their songs, and I think I would probably really enjoy them. But yeah, there's a few stories that I thought were extremely moving and extremely beautiful, both lyric and art. So I'll definitely will be doing a book review for this comic book. I actually at this point have a few comic books that I really want to further discuss with you guys, so I might do like a few comic books in a review and discuss them further. But I loved it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It was great. I'm glad I got to read that one. And now moving on to the 5-star reads, which there are quite a few. I will try my hardest to get through them as fast as possible because I realize that these videos are getting very long. And okay, so the first one that I'll talk about is this poetry anthology. It's called Love Poems, and I bought it honestly because I thought it was absolutely gorgeous. But as gorgeous as it is in the outside, it also is in the inside. It's got poetry from a wide range of different authors. It starts from a really old time poetry, and it goes all the way to William Butler Yeats, and he was from 1865 to 1939. So it is mainly classic poetry, and I loved a lot of them. As you can see, I tagged a lot of the poems in here. I really enjoyed a lot of the poetry in this anthology, and I highly recommend it. I loved it. It was great. It was a lot of really well-known, well-loved poetry in this collection, and it was all classic poetry, which I haven't read in a little while, so very excited to have picked that up. Then I also read Tales of Mystery and Terror by Edgar Allan Poe, and this is great illustrated classics, so there are illustrations throughout. I love this. This was such a fast and enjoyable read. It's got a total of 4 stories, and those are The Telltale Heart, The Cast of Amontillado, The Fall of the House of Usher, and The Gold Bug. And I had read all of those stories actually in the past, but I loved them so much more in this edition just because of the illustrations that go throughout. They're all black and white, they're all very spooky, and I just love the feel that this book had. Very enjoyable. Then I also read Bridge to Terabithia, which is by Catherine Patterson, and this is a modern classic middle grade story. I had never read this book before, but I had watched the movie, and I'm just so glad I read the book. It was gorgeous. There were some differences from the movie, but I have to say I think I love them both. I really enjoyed this a lot though. It made me cry at the end, and it just gave me the warm, fuzzy feelings throughout most of the story as well. So if you have not heard of this before, which I highly doubt, this is pretty much about 2 kids and their friendship in this very small town, and how they rely on each other, how their friendship is built, and I don't really know how to explain it because I wouldn't want to spoil you guys, but it's just a beautiful story. It is very tragic and sad towards the end. It's about parenting and the relationship that kids have with their parents, how kids cope with day-to-day things, and just, I don't know, it was beautiful. I loved it. It was about family and friendship and all of that. It was fantastic. I really enjoyed this. Then I also read The Beginning of the World in the Middle of the Night by Jen Campbell. This is a short story collection. I absolutely adore this. I have a book review for this as well, where I talk a little bit about each of the stories inside. There are quite a few stories in there, some shorter than others. Some I enjoy more than others, but they were all absolutely beautiful. They are all mainly inspired by fairy tales, by mythology. There is some magical realism in some of them as well. It was just a very unique and very beautiful collection, because even though some of the stories were inspired by fairy tales and some were inspired by mythology, it was by no means a retelling. Like, they were very unique with just inspiration from those things. So I really loved it. You should definitely check out my review if you would like to know more in detail what I thought of the collection, but it was beautiful. I finally Woo! Finished reading It by Stephen King. Nothing is impossible, you guys. If you persevere, you will accomplish things in life. Yes, I've been reading this book for months, but I did it, and I absolutely loved it. I had watched, first when I picked this up months and months ago, I had no intention of watching any of the movies because I wanted to finish reading the book first. However, I did watch the first movie that came out for it somewhere through the first section of the book. And I hated the movie. I thought it was horrible. Personally, I know a lot of people love that movie, but I thought it was just a horrible movie. I didn't care for it. I hated the acting. I just did not enjoy that movie at all. So it got me scared, and I thought, oh my gosh, what if the book is kind of like the movie, but longer, much longer. But no, the book is amazing. I loved it. I will definitely be doing a book review of this because there is no way that I can tell you guys what I really think of this briefly, because I have so many feelings and so many thoughts about this book. But pretty much there is a monster in this town and it's killing kids. Some kids have noticed and end up fighting this monster. They believe the monster is dead, but they're not 100% sure. So they make a promise that if the monster returns at some point, they will all come back regardless of when this happens, and they will put an end to it once and for all. So the monster does return years later, 30-something years later, I believe. They're adults at this point. And they are all called by the one of the group who stayed behind to keep an eye on things. And eventually, most of them return, with the exception of one who commits suicide at the very beginning of the book. But yes, they all get back together and they all fight the monster again. So that's kind of what the story is about. However, the best part of this is the amazing writing and the character development. It is extraordinary just how much detail there is for these characters. I mean, they feel like real people. These characters are built so beautifully. Not just the characters, but the town and the surroundings and the changes as they happen. I mean, the writing was just so good. It really made me just admire Stephen King's writing so much more. Loved it. Like I said, I will do a book review where I talk a little bit more in detail about it. There were a couple of things that had me a little bothered. There were a couple of scenes that were a little bit difficult for me to read. And there is some characters I didn't care for too much. And also there was a lot of language that I didn't care for too much. But in the end, I realized it is just part of the story, is part of where it takes place and the time in which everything takes place. So, which just means that he did a fantastic job and he's just very well researched and he knows so much of what he's writing about. I'm gonna stop at this point, but I'll definitely be having a book review. Keep a lookout for that. It was amazing. Loved it. So glad I finally finished it. And the last book that I have to share with you here today is A Dog's Purpose by W. Bruce Cameron. This was such a delight. I loved this book so much. I'm sure you've all heard about it at this point. There's a movie as well, but it was just a beautiful story. It's through the perspective of a dog's soul. Now, this dog keeps on having lives and he fulfills each of his dog lives. He dies and he returns as a different dog. And throughout his different lives, he is questioning what his purpose in life is. Like, he wants to fulfill his purpose, and he feels that every time he comes back is because his purpose as a dog has not been fulfilled. So that's pretty much what this story is about. I think I'll be doing a book review of this one as well. I am starting to have a lot of books I need to review. So if I can, I'll do a review of this one also. But it was just a beautiful story about friendship between a human and their furry friends, and also about what an animal or what our pets might think of us, how they might view our conversations, our interactions, our actions. It really makes you look at your pets differently. It was just heartwarming and beautiful and sad, and loved it. There you guys have it. Those are all of the books that I read in January. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you soon in another video. Bye!